The security room was cold and silent. Every screen on every monitor cast a pale blue light across the faces of men who had stopped breathing the moment their boss leaned forward in his chair. The footage was playing for the third time. The same corridor. The same timestamp. 12:04 a.m. The same old woman moving through the dark with the quiet, deliberate purpose of someone who had been planning this moment for much longer than one night. He watched Mama Agnes unlock that door without flinching. He watched her hold it open. He watched Ngozi step through it and disappear into the soul night. He watched Mama Agnes close the door, lock it, and walk back down that corridor the same way she came. Calmly, like she had simply taken out the trash. The Mafia Boss sat back slowly. Nobody in that room spoke. Nobody moved. The kind of silence that fills a space when the most dangerous man in it has just made a decision that everyone else in the room can already feel the weight of before he opens his mouth. He stood, adjusted his jacket, turned to his head of security.
Go and get me that old slave.
Yes, sir.
The head of security was out of the door before the echo settled. And somewhere on the other side of that mansion, an old woman was already sitting on the edge of her bed, with her hands folded in her lap, listening to the footsteps coming down the corridor toward her room. She had been sitting there since midnight. She had not slept. She had not packed anything. She had simply sat and waited with the particular stillness of a woman who has done something she would do again without hesitation and is completely prepared to face whatever comes next. Before we continue, if you're new to my channel, you are welcome to a place where story hit different and take you somewhere deep, where emotions feel real and unforgettable. Hit that subscribe button if you have not subscribed yet and tell us where you are watching from today. Please note that this is part 2, and if you have not watched part 1 yet, check the pinned comment or the video description right now for the link, because everything you are about to watch started there and you are going to need that story to feel the full weight of what is coming. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Mama Agnes did not stand up yet. She waited until the door opened, until she could see their faces. 2 of his men, large, expressionless. One of them was holding handcuffs. She stood up then, slowly, with the unhurried dignity of a woman who has decided that the only thing left in her control is how she carries herself through what is about to happen. She walked toward them. She extended both wrists forward without being asked. She looked past both of them the way you look past something that does not require your full attention. Not with contempt, not with fear, simply with the calm of someone whose conscience is completely clear. They put the cuffs on her and walked her through the mansion she had worked in for 11 years. Past the kitchen where she had cooked 10,000 meals. Past the corridor where she had mopped the floors in the dark so they would be clean before the household woke. Past the sitting room where she had once found Ngozi alone at 2 in the morning and sat down across from her and listened to 8 years of pain pour out of a young woman who had been carrying it with nowhere to put it. She did not look at any of it. They brought her to him. He was standing in the center of a private room deep inside the mansion. No desk between them, no chair. Just him standing in the center of that room with his hands behind his back and his eyes on her face with the expression of a man who has been betrayed by the last person he expected it from. She stood in front of him, cuffed, 62 years old, 5'3", and she looked at him directly without dropping her eyes once. He let the silence sit for a long time. That was one of his weapons. Silence. He used it the way other men used volume. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and completely without heat, which made it more frightening than shouting would ever be. He told her that she had worked in his house for 11 years, that he had fed her, housed her, paid her wages every month without fail, that she had eaten at his table and slept under his roof and been given more security than most women her age could dream of. And she had used all of that, used 11 years of his trust and his roof and his money, to open a door. He told her that the 5 months of salary he currently owed her were gone, that she would not be receiving them. He told her that every wage going forward was canceled, every single one. He told her that she would remain in this house, that she would continue to cook and clean and serve, that she would do this for the next 10 years without receiving one single Korean won in payment, that she would not leave these walls, that she would not make phone calls, that she would not speak to anyone outside that mansion, That she would work and she would serve and she would do it knowing that every single day she spent inside those walls was the direct consequence of the choice she made when she put a key in that lock. He told her that the room she was standing in was going to be her world until his wife was found. And when his wife was found, she would be moved to the servants' quarters and her 10 years of unpaid service would begin. And if she ever did anything like this again, the consequences would be something she would not recover from. He finished speaking. The room was completely silent. Mama Agnes stood in front of the most feared man in Seoul with her wrists in handcuffs and 11 years of her life being cancelled in front of her, and she did not cry. She did not argue. She did not beg. She simply looked at him. And then she looked away. Not in defeat. In the particular way that people who have lived long enough look away from things that no longer require their attention. Like she had heard everything he said and filed it somewhere quiet and was now returning to the only thing that actually mattered to her. She was going to be okay. The mafia boss stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out of the room. The door locked behind him. Mama Agnes stood in the center of that room alone for a moment. Then she walked to the corner. She sat down on the floor with her back against the wall because there was no chair. She folded her hands in her lap. She closed her eyes. And on her face, in the silence of that locked room, with 11 years of unpaid wages cancelled and 10 more stretching ahead of her, appeared the smallest and most undefeatable smile that anyone in that mansion would never get to see. Because she had done it. The girl was out. Whatever happened next, the girl was out. The city of Seoul did not know it was being used as a hunting ground. Idiwan moved the way it always moved, loud and layered and full of the particular energy of a place where the world comes to exist outside its own borders. Street vendors calling out in 3 languages. Music bleeding through doorways. The smell of food from every direction. It was the kind of neighborhood that swallowed people whole, and that was exactly why 2 women were hiding in a room above a laundry shop hoping it would swallow them too. It would not be enough. The mafia boss had resources that Idiwan had never been designed to resist. Within hours of watching that security footage, his men were already moving through those streets with the systematic patience of people who do this for a living. They did not rush. They did not draw attention. They moved in pairs, wearing ordinary clothing, asking ordinary questions in the particular way that makes ordinary people decide very quickly that the safest answer is the honest one. They showed photographs. They pressed. They waited. They moved to the next street and did it again. The Nigerian woman who ran the laundry shop had been in Idiwan long enough to recognize that kind of movement when she saw it. She had seen it before in other cities in other years, and she had learned that the time between recognizing it and acting on it was shorter than most people assumed. She was behind her counter when she saw the first pair of men through her shop window moving slowly up the opposite side of the street. Something about the way they stopped at each doorway. Something about the way one of them held his phone. She did not wait. She locked the shop front and went upstairs immediately. Nkechi was sitting against the wall in the small room. She looked up when the door opened and read the woman's face before a single word was spoken. That was one of the things 6 years of surviving in a house where reading faces was the difference between a difficult day and a dangerous one had given her. She could read a room in the time it took most people to walk into it. "They are looking," the woman said simply. "On the street. 2 of them. There will be more." Nkechi was on her feet before the sentence finished. They moved Ngozi to a different room at the back of the building. Smaller. No window facing the street. They changed everything about their routine. No movement during daylight hours. No voices above a whisper. The Nigerian woman began turning away customers and keeping the shop front dark during the hours when the men were most active on the street. She did not ask for an explanation. She had already decided whose side she was on the moment she pointed a frightened woman up her staircase in the middle of the night. For 2 days it worked. On the 3rd day, the hunger became a problem. They had been careful about food, eating small amounts of what the Nigerian woman brought them, rationing it, making it stretch. But on the morning of the 3rd day there was nothing left, and the woman had not been able to leave the shop to get more because the street outside had been active since early morning. By the time evening came and the street quieted, they had not eaten in over 24 hours. Nkechi's fever had returned. Not as bad as before, but enough. She was pale and hollow-eyed, and her hands, when she held them up, had a faint tremor that she was trying to pretend was not there. She had not said a word about being hungry. She would not. That was who Nkechi was. She would fold in half before she asked for something. Ngozi watched her from across the small room and felt something tighten in her chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the particular fury of watching someone you love suffer something preventable. She made her decision quietly the way she made all her decisions. She stood up. "I am going to get food," she said. Nkechi's eyes opened fully. "No. There is a stall 2 streets over. I saw it when we came in. I will be back in 20 minutes. Ngozi." Nkechi sat up straighter, fighting the dizziness the movement caused. "You cannot go out there. You know what is outside. You have not eaten in a day. You have a fever. You need food and water, and I am going to get them." She was already pulling on her jacket. Her movements were calm and certain. 7 months pregnant and moving with the same deliberate efficiency she had always moved with when she had made up her mind about something. 20 minutes. I will stay close to the walls. I will keep my head down. 20 minutes and I am back. Please. Nkechi's voice dropped to something that was not quite a whisper and not quite a plea but existed somewhere between the two. Please do not go. Ngozi crossed the small room and crouched down in front of her. She took both of Nkechi's hands in hers and held them for a moment. She looked at her directly the way she had looked at her on a truck leaving Lagos 8 years ago when she told her to hold on. I will be back, she said. 20 minutes. She stood. She opened the door. She went downstairs and out into the Idiwan evening before Nkechi could find another word to stop her. The street was quieter than it had been during the day. The evening crowd was different, thinner, more purposeful. People moving between destinations rather than lingering. The food stall she had seen was 2 streets north and she moved toward it, keeping close to the storefronts. Her jacket pulled around her, her head slightly down, one hand pressed against her stomach the way it always was now. Automatic. Protective. A gesture she no longer had to think about. She found the stall. She bought 2 portions of rice and a bottle of water and a small container of soup that was still warm. She paid and turned around and began walking back the way she came. The alley that led back to the laundry shop was narrow and dim. She turned into it and walked 5 steps, and then her eyes found the end of the alley and everything in her body went still simultaneously. A black car was parked at the far end. Engine off. Lights off. The particular stillness of a vehicle that has been parked there with intention. For one fraction of a second she stood completely frozen. Then she ran. She was fast. Even 7 months pregnant, she was fast in the way that pure adrenaline makes a body capable of things it would not otherwise attempt. She turned left out of the alley, then right down a narrower street. Her breath was loud in her own ears. The food was still in her arms. She could not think about putting it down. She turned another corner into a wider street with people on it, and for one wild second she thought she might make it. She thought she might lose them in the crowd and double back and be back in that room in 10 minutes, and Nkechi would never have to know how close it came. Then she ran directly into 2 men coming from the other direction. They were not running. They did not need to run. They had simply been positioned at the other end of the route she would take. They had known which way she would go before she went there. This was not a chase. This was a net. And she had walked into the center of it carrying rice and soup for a sick friend. They took her without violence. Efficiently and completely. One moment she was standing on a Idiwan street with food in her arms. The next she was inside the black car with the door closed and the city moving past the tinted windows and the rice and the soup and the water sitting on the pavement of that narrow street exactly where she had dropped them. Getting cold. Back in the small room above the laundry shop, Nkechi sat with her back against the wall and her eyes on the door, and she counted the minutes the way she had counted everything for the past 6 years. With the quiet precision of someone for whom patience was not a virtue but a survival tool. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Then an hour. She went to the window that faced the side street. She looked down at the pavement below. Nothing moved. The street was quiet in the wrong way. The particular quiet that is not peaceful but empty. She already knew. She sat back down slowly. Her hands were shaking, and this time it had nothing to do with the fever. She put her face in both her hands and she cried in the way that people cry when they have been holding on to something with everything they have and they feel it go. Completely. Without sound. The kind of crying that does not ask for anything because it knows there is nothing to ask. She cried for a long time in that small room. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood up. She went downstairs. The Nigerian woman was behind her counter in the dim shop. She looked up when she heard Nkechi on the stairs, and the expression on her face told Nkechi everything before she asked a single question. The woman had seen it from her window. She had watched the car at the end of the alley. She had seen them put Ngozi inside it. She had stood behind her shop glass with her hand over her mouth and been able to do nothing. They took her, the woman said quietly. Nkechi stood at the bottom of the stairs and received those 3 words into her body like something physical. Where? She said. Not a question. She already knew where. Ngozi had told her everything about the mansion. The address. The neighborhood. The walls. The guards. She had described it the way you describe something you have memorized against the day you might need someone else to know it. The woman looked at her carefully. What are you going to do? Nkechi looked at the door of the shop. At the street beyond it. At the city that had just taken the only person she had found after 8 years of looking. Everything, she said. She turned and went back upstairs. They brought her through the mansion's main entrance like she was something they had recovered rather than someone they had taken. The guards who lined the corridor said nothing. The staff who caught glimpses of her from doorways said nothing. The entire mansion had learned years ago that the spaces between what happened in those walls and what was acknowledged out loud were spaces best left undisturbed. Ngozi walked between the 2 men with her spine straight and her eyes forward and her hand pressed against her stomach, and she did not look at any of it. Not the chandeliers. Not the grand staircase. Not the dining room where she had spent 8 years sitting alone at the wrong end of a table that was never meant for her. She had already decided that she was not going to give this house the satisfaction of watching her arrive broken. He was in his study. She had known he would be. He always conducted the things that mattered to him in that room. Business. Decisions. Consequences. It was where he went when something required his full attention, and she had apparently risen to that level now. The irony of it was not lost on her. 8 years of living in the same house and she had never once been worth his full attention. One night of escape and suddenly she was the most important thing in every room he occupied. They brought her in and closed the door and left the 2 of them alone. He was sitting behind his desk. He looked at her for a very long time without speaking. She stood in the center of that study 7 months pregnant with her jacket still on from the Idiwan street and her hair slightly disheveled from running and her eyes giving him exactly what they had always given him and exactly what they had given him at 18 years old in a room full of people who expected her to break. Nothing. Not fear. Not guilt. Not the apology he was waiting for. Nothing. Why did you leave? He said finally. You already know why. I want to hear you say it. No. She said simply. You do not get that from me. Something moved behind his eyes. He stood up slowly from behind the desk and moved around it, and she watched him come toward her and she did not step back. She had stopped stepping back from this man a long time ago. Perhaps she had never really started. This is your home, he said. His voice was controlled, measured. The voice of a man making a reasonable argument. Everything you have is here. Everything you are came from what I provided. You have no idea what would have happened to you out there without the protection of this house. She looked at him steadily. The protection of this house, she repeated slowly, as if the words needed to be held up to the light to be properly examined. You want to talk to me about the protection of this house. I kept you safe. You kept me contained. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. There is a difference that you have spent 8 years pretending does not exist. You kept me in a beautiful room and called it safety and expected me to be grateful for the quality of my cage. The world outside those walls has done nothing to me that those walls did not already do first. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the particular set of his jaw that meant he was choosing his next words with care because the ones he actually wanted to say were not going to serve him. You are carrying my children, he said. I am aware of that. Then you understand that you are not leaving. Not now. Not ever. "What I understand," she said, "is that you have spent 8 years not seeing me, and now that I have chosen to leave you have suddenly decided I am worth looking at. That is not love. That is not even possession. That is the panic of a man who does not know how to want something until it walks away from him." His voice dropped to the register that had made grown men leave rooms. "After you give birth, I will take those children. They carry my blood and they will stay in this house. And you," he paused, letting the weight of what was coming settle into the room before he said it. "You will go back to where I found you, back to where you came from before I chose you. I will make one call and you will disappear so completely that those children will grow up never knowing your name." The room went completely silent. Ngozi stood in the center of it and absorbed every word he had just said into the part of herself that had been absorbing impossible things since she was 18 years old, and she felt them land, and she felt their weight, and she felt the specific terror of a mother hearing someone threaten to take her children, and she stood completely still, and she did not give him one single fraction of what he was looking for. Not one tear, not one flinch, not one word. She looked at him the way she had looked at him across that gala ballroom. The way she had looked at him across 8 years of dinner tables. The way she had looked at him at 18 years old in a room where everything was designed to make her small. With those eyes that had never once in her entire life learned the language of surrender. He waited for the fear. It did not come. He held her gaze for another long moment. Then he turned and walked to the door and spoke to someone outside it. 2 guards entered. He left without looking at her again. The guards walked her through the mansion and down a corridor she had never been taken down before, and stopped in front of a door and unlocked it and gestured for her to enter. She walked in. The door locked behind her. The room was dim, small, a far cry from the bedroom she had occupied for 8 years with its grand windows and its view of the Seoul skyline. This room had one small window set high in the wall and a single lamp in the corner and nothing else except for the figure sitting in the corner on the floor with her back against the wall and her hands folded in her lap. Mama Agnes opened her eyes. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Mama Agnes was on her feet and crossing the small room, and Ngozi walked into her arms, and they held each other in the dim light of that locked room with the whole weight of everything that had happened pressing down on both of them, and neither of them spoke because there was nothing to say that the holding did not already say more completely. They stayed like that for a long time. Then Ngozi pulled back. She looked at Mama Agnes's face, at the lines of it, at the eyes that had seen everything and held everything and given everything. She looked at this woman who had worked 11 years in a cold house and used every one of those years to open one door on one midnight, and she felt something in her chest that was too large and too complicated to have a name. She leaned close. "Someone knows where I am," she whispered. Mama Agnes looked at her. Something shifted in those warm, dark eyes. Understanding. Then something else. The particular look of a woman who has been sitting in a locked room waiting to hear something that tells her the story is not over yet. She nodded once. They sat down together against the wall of that small room in the dark, and they waited. Outside the mansion, Seoul moved through its night indifferently. Inside the walls, the guards made their rotations. The cameras watched their corridors. The Mafia Boss sat somewhere in this building, certain that he had recovered what was his, and that the situation was now under his control. He was wrong. 2 streets away from a small laundry shop in Idiwan, a young Nigerian woman was sitting alone in a dim room, wiping the last of her tears from her face with the back of her hand. She had cried. She had allowed herself that. One full release of everything that the past hours had put inside her. And now she was done with crying, because crying was not going to get Ngozi out of that mansion. Crying was not going to find Epha in Japan. Crying was not going to end anything. She stood up. She pulled out the phone the Nigerian woman had quietly pressed into her hand when she came back upstairs. A simple device. Prepaid. Untraceable. The woman had said nothing when she gave it to her. She had simply placed it in Nkechi's palm and closed her fingers around it and gone back downstairs. Nkechi sat on the mat on the floor with the phone in her hands, and she thought about everything Ngozi had told her. The address of the mansion. The name of the man who owned it. The things that had been done inside those walls. She thought about Epha somewhere in Japan, in a place nobody had found yet. She thought about 3 girls from Lagos who had held each other's hands in the dark of a truck and been told they were going somewhere better. She thought about all of it for exactly as long as she needed to. Then she opened the camera on the phone and pressed record and looked directly into the lens and began to speak. She did not rehearse what she was going to say. There was no time for rehearsal and no need for it because she had been living inside the story for 8 years and every word of it was already inside her, organized and waiting, the way things organize themselves inside a person who has had nothing to do but survive and remember. She sat on the mat on the floor of that small room above the laundry shop with the phone propped against the wall in front of her, and the single lamp casting its dim light across her face, and she looked into that camera the way she had learned to look at everything dangerous in her life. Directly. Without performance. Without the particular kind of presentation that fear produces in people who are trying to seem unafraid. She was not trying to seem anything. She was simply going to tell the truth in the order it happened and trust that the truth was enough. She pressed record. My name is Nkechi. I am 26 years old. I am from Lagos, Nigeria. And I am sitting in a room in Idiwan, Seoul, South Korea because I have nowhere else to go, and the woman who was with me in this room was taken 12 hours ago by the men of the person I am about to name. She did not look away from the camera. Not once. 8 years ago I was 18 years old. My 2 best friends and I were approached by a man in Lagos who told us there was work in South Korea. Good work. Good pay. A chance to build something and come home better than we left. We were 18. We believed him. We got into a truck on a Thursday night, and by the time we understood what was happening to us, we were already too far from home for understanding to help. Her voice did not shake. It was the steadiest thing in that room. We were brought to Seoul, South Korea as part of an organized operation that moves young women across borders and sells them. We were 18 years old. There were other women there. Many of them. From different countries. Different ages. All of us taken the same way. With a promise. She paused for exactly 1 second. Not for effect. To breathe. We were separated. My friend Epha was taken first. Then I was taken to a house in Seoul where I worked without freedom for 6 years. I escaped 1 week ago. I walked for 4 hours in the cold and I found my way to Idiwan because I had heard the word once and held on to it the way you hold on to things when they are the only things you have. She reached beside her and picked up a photograph. She held it up to the camera. A Nigerian woman. Beautiful. Dark skin. Diamond earrings. The photograph taken at some point in the mansion when she was dressed for an event. Ngozi. Alive and present in a photograph that Nkechi had been carrying since the night they found each other. This is my friend Ngozi. We were taken together from Lagos at 18 years old. She was selected from the group we were brought to Seoul with, and she was taken by a man whose name I am going to give you in 1 minute. He forced her into a marriage inside his criminal organization. She lived in his mansion in Seoul for 8 years. She escaped 11 days ago. She was with me in this room until 12 hours ago when she went out to get food for us because we had not eaten and his men were waiting for her. She put the photograph down and picked up a second one. This one older, slightly faded. 3 girls on a Lego street. 18 years old. Laughing. The last photograph taken before the truck. This is Epha. She pointed to the girl on the right of the photograph. Round face. Soft eyes. Natural twists. She was taken from the same location in Seoul and sold to an organization in Japan approximately 2 years ago. We do not know exactly where she is. We do not know what condition she is in. We have not heard her voice in 8 years. She put the photograph down carefully. The man who took Ngozi. The man whose organization moved us from Lagos to Seoul. The man whose men took my friend out of this neighborhood 12 hours ago. She looked directly into the camera. His name is Park Jun-seo. He lives at... And she gave the full address of the mansion. The neighborhood. The street. The building details she had memorized from everything Ngozi had told her in that small room during the days they had together. He runs an organization that operates across Seoul and into Japan. I am giving you his name. I am giving you his address. I am giving you everything Ngozi told me about what happens inside those walls because she made sure I knew it all in case something exactly like this happened. She leaned slightly closer to the camera. I am not asking for sympathy. I am not asking for attention. I am asking for action. There are women in houses in the city right now that look like normal houses from the outside. Women who were taken the same way we were taken. Women who are surviving the same way we survived. I am asking every person who sees this video to share it right now. Not later. Right now. I am asking the FBI. I am asking the Korean National Police. I am asking every government agency and every law enforcement body that has jurisdiction over what I have just described to act today. Not tomorrow. Today. Because my friend is in that mansion right now, and tomorrow is a word I am not willing to trust. She held the camera's gaze for 30 full seconds without blinking. Without moving. With the absolute stillness of a woman who has said everything that needed to be said and is now waiting for the world to decide what it is going to do about it. Then she reached forward and stopped the recording. She sat back on the mat and looked at the phone in her hands for a long moment. Then she opened the phone's social media applications one by one. She posted the video to every platform she could access. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, every platform with its own caption. The same words each time. His name, his address, the names of the 3 girls from Lagos. A plea that was not a plea but a demand dressed in the language of someone who has run out of alternatives. Then she put the phone down and sat in the dark and waited. Within 1 hour, the video had been shared 10,000 times. The comments were in Korean and English and Yoruba and a dozen other languages, and they were all saying the same thing in their different words. That they had seen it. That they were sharing it. That someone needed to do something right now. Within 3 hours, it was on the Korean evening news. A presenter with a grave expression reading the name Park Jun-seo and the address in Idiwan and the account of 3 Nigerian women taken from Lagos 8 years ago. Within 4 hours, it was on every major English-language news platform. Within 6 hours, the American networks had picked it up. Journalists were outside the mansion attempting to film through its high walls. The Korean National Police were fielding calls from government officials, demanding to know why they were not already at that address. Within 12 hours, the answer arrived at the laundry shop door in Idiwan in the form of 2 FBI agents and 3 Korean law enforcement officers standing on the pavement outside with their badges already raised. The Nigerian woman who ran the shop opened the door before they knocked. She had been watching the news on her phone behind the counter, and she had been ready for the past 2 hours. She pointed upstairs without a word. They went up the narrow staircase and knocked on the small door at the top. Kechi opened it. She was still sitting on the mat in the same position she had been in when she recorded the video. She looked at the badges. She looked at the faces behind them. She looked at the female FBI agent at the front of the group who was looking back at her with an expression that contained both urgency and something that understood what it had cost this woman to make that video. "Are you Kechi?" the agent asked. "Yes," she said. "We need you to come with us. We need everything you know." Kechi stood up. She picked up the small bag that had been packed and ready beside her since the moment she posted the video because she had known this was coming and she had made sure she was prepared for it. She looked around the small room one final time. The mat on the floor. The single lamp. The window that faced the side street. The place where she and Ngozi had held each other on the floor and cried 8 years of grief into each other's shoulders. She walked out of the room and down the narrow staircase and through the laundry shop, and she stopped in front of the Nigerian woman behind the counter, and she took both of the woman's hands in hers and held them for one moment without speaking. The woman nodded once. Kechi walked out into the Seoul morning and got into the vehicle that was waiting, and the door closed and the city moved around it, and somewhere across that city in a locked room inside a mansion, a woman with her hands on her pregnant stomach was still waiting, and Kechi was done waiting. It was time. The morning after Nkechi posted the video, the Mafia Boss mansion sat behind its high walls exactly as it always had. Quiet, composed, untouchable in the particular way that places built by powerful men are designed to appear untouchable. The guards were at their posts. The cameras were running. The household staff moved through their routines with the mechanical efficiency of people who had learned that the safest way to exist inside those walls was to become as invisible and as predictable as the furniture. Nobody inside those walls knew yet what was moving toward them. The vehicles came from every direction at once. That was the first thing that made it different from anything the mansion's security system had been designed to handle. Not one approach from one direction that the cameras could track and the guards could respond to and the Mafia Boss's men could organize themselves against. Every direction. Simultaneously. Police cars coming from the north and the south. FBI vehicles from the east. Government vans sealing every secondary exit on the western perimeter. They moved with the coordinated precision of an operation that had been planned in the 12 hours since Nkechi walked out of that laundry shop and sat in an FBI office and gave them everything she had. The guards inside saw it on the monitors at the same moment the sound of engines reached them through the walls. For approximately 4 seconds nobody moved. Then everything moved at once. The Mafia Boss's men were not unprepared for danger. They had been trained for it, armed for it, organized into response teams that had protocols for exactly this kind of situation. What they had not been prepared for was the scale. There were more officers surrounding that mansion than there were rooms inside it. Every gate, every wall, every service entrance and underground exit and delivery point had been identified from Nkechi's information and sealed before the first vehicle was even visible from the security cameras. There was nowhere to go. The fight that followed was real, but it was brief. The Mafia Boss's men were outnumbered on every side and outmaneuvered before the first shot was fired. One by one the guards were disarmed. The weapons they reached for were taken from them before they could be used. The men who ran found every exit already covered. Within 18 minutes of the first vehicle arriving at the mansion gates, the perimeter was secure, and the FBI and Korean National Police were moving through the front entrance of the most feared criminal's home in Seoul with their weapons drawn and their instructions clear. Room by room, corridor by corridor, they moved through the grand entrance hall with its chandelier and its marble floors. Through the formal dining room with its long table that seated 20 and had almost always been set for one. Through the kitchen where a small piece of burned paper in the bottom of the stove would later be identified as the remnant of an escape route drawn in pencil and memorized and destroyed. Through the security room where the monitors still showed feeds of corridors that were now full of law enforcement officers rather than the men who had been paid to watch them. Room by room, corridor by corridor, they went deeper into the mansion, past the rooms that the household staff used, past the storage areas, down a corridor that did not appear on any of the publicly available floor plans of the building, and that Nkechi had described in specific detail from everything Ngozi had told her during the days they had spent together in that small room in Idiwan. They stopped in front of a door, a heavy door, locked from the outside, the kind of door that exists in a building not because of architectural necessity but because someone needed a room that could be secured against the person inside it rather than against people outside. The officer at the front of the group looked at it for one moment. Then they broke it open. The room was dim, small, a single lamp in the corner. One small window set high in the wall letting in a pale rectangle of morning light that fell across the concrete floor and illuminated almost nothing useful. And in the center of that dim room, standing with her hands folded in front of her and her short gray hair neat and her simple dark uniform still on from the day before because there had been nothing else to change into, was an elderly South African woman who looked at the armed officers filling her doorframe with the expression of someone who had been expecting this arrival and had simply been waiting for it to get here. Mama Agnes. She did not speak. She did not move toward them. She simply stood in the center of that room with her hands folded and her eyes clear and her dignity completely intact despite everything the past days had done to the circumstances around her. Behind her, sitting against the far wall with her back straight and her knees drawn up and both hands pressed flat against her stomach, was Ngozi. 7 months pregnant. Her jacket still on from the Idiwan street. Her eyes open. Exhausted in the specific way that goes deeper than sleep deprivation, the exhaustion of a person who has been holding something enormous for longer than a body was designed to hold it. But alive. Completely and undeniably alive. And looking at the officers in her doorframe with those eyes that had never once in 26 years learned how to be anything other than exactly what they were. The officer at the front of the group was a woman. She looked at both of them. She took in the room. The locked door they had just broken open. The single lamp. The high small window. The 2 African women who had been sitting in this room waiting for something and had apparently decided a long time ago that whatever came through that door, when it finally opened they were going to meet it on their feet. She spoke in English. "You are safe now. Both of you." Mama Agnes closed her eyes. It was the smallest movement. The most contained response possible to 3 words that had the weight of everything behind them. She simply closed her eyes and stood there in the center of that room, and behind her closed eyelids the 11 years played out the way they always played out when she let herself go quiet enough to hear them. The cooking, the cleaning, the corridor mopping, the midnight tea, the kitchen table, the young woman's hands in hers, the escape route drawn on a small piece of paper, the key in the lock at 12:04 a.m., the face she had held in her old hands one final time before the door closed. She had done it. She had done it, and the girl was safe, and that was every single thing that mattered. Ngozi was on her feet before any of the officers reached her. She had been sitting against that wall for 2 days, and she stood up with the same straightness she had always stood with, and she walked toward the doorframe, and the officers moved aside for her, and she stepped out of that locked room and into the corridor, and she stopped and she looked at the mansion around her. The grand, cold, expensive mansion that had been her cage for 8 years dressed up as a home. Then she put both hands on her stomach. Growing and alive and completely unaware of everything that had been endured to give them a world that was not this one. And Ngozi, who had not cried in front of anyone in 8 years, who had preserved every tear with the discipline of a woman who understood that breaking down was a luxury she had never been able to afford, who had stood bald in a Seoul ballroom and not cried, who had sat alone in the dark of a mansion and not cried, who had packed a bag at midnight and argued with the most dangerous man in Seoul and not cried, who had been captured in an Idiwan alley 7 months pregnant and not cried, who had sat in a locked room for 2 days listening to her husband's threats and not cried. She cried. Completely. Without restraint. Without the hand over the mouth or the shoulders held in or any of the containment strategies she had spent years perfecting. She stood in the corridor of the mansion that had taken 8 years of her life, and she cried with her hands on her stomach and her face completely open, and every single thing she had been holding since a truck left Lagos 8 years ago came out of her in that corridor, with the FBI and the Korean police around her and Mama Agnes's hand finding her shoulder from behind. Not from pain. Not from humiliation. Not from fear. From relief. From the specific, overwhelming relief of a woman who has been fighting for so long that when the fighting finally stops, the body does not know what to do with the absence of it except release everything it has been using to sustain the fight. The officers around her said nothing. Some of them looked at the floor. Some of them looked at the ceiling. One of them, a young Korean male officer who had been on the force for 3 years and had never been on a raid like this one, turned his face away and pressed his lips together and blinked several times in rapid succession. Mama Agnes stood behind Ngozi with her hand on her shoulder and said nothing, because she had always known that the thing this girl needed most was not words. It had never been words. It had been someone standing close enough that she knew she was not alone. She stood close. She had always stood close. Outside the mansion, the Seoul morning continued around them indifferently. News vans were already gathering at the perimeter. The Mafia Boss's name was trending across every platform in Korea and beyond. His organization was being dismantled piece by piece as the evidence teams moved through the rooms of his mansion and found the particular kind of documentation that powerful men accumulate when they believe they are untouchable. But inside a corridor deep in that mansion, 2 African women stood together in the particular silence that follows something enormous finally being over, and the world around them gave them that moment and did not rush it. It had been a very long time coming. He was not there. That was the first thing the FBI team leader reported to his superiors when the mansion sweep was complete and every room had been cleared and every person found inside had been accounted for and identified. The guards were there. The household staff were there. The evidence was there in quantities that would keep prosecutors occupied for the better part of a decade. But the man whose name was on every search warrant and whose face was on every briefing document and whose address Nkechi had given them with the particular precision of someone who had memorized it against exactly this kind of day was not in his own mansion. He had not been there for at least 2 hours before they arrived. Someone had warned him. That much was immediately clear. Someone inside his organization or close enough to its edges to have seen Kechi's video in its first hour of circulation had made a call, and that call had moved faster than the 12 hours it took the FBI and Korean National Police to organize and execute the raid. He had walked out of his own front door with enough time to disappear into a city that he knew far better than any law enforcement agency that was now looking for him, and he had done it calmly and completely because men like him always have an exit prepared before they need it. But the city had changed overnight. His face was everywhere. Not just on the news channels that were running the story on continuous loop with the footage of Nkechi's video playing alongside photographs of the mansion and maps of his organization's known locations. His face was on phones, on social media feeds, on the screens of every coffee shop and restaurant and convenience store in Seoul, where people were watching the story unfold in real time with the particular appetite that the public develops for the downfall of powerful men who have been operating in the dark. Taxi drivers knew his face. Shop owners knew his face. The woman at the convenience store 3 blocks from his primary safe house recognized it the moment he walked past her window, and she did not say anything to him, but she picked up her phone before he had reached the end of the street. He was the most recognizable wanted man in Korea, and he was trying to move through a city that was looking for him with 10,000 pairs of civilian eyes in addition to every law enforcement resource that had been redirected toward finding him. He moved carefully, deliberately, from one safe house to the next using routes he had memorized years ago for exactly this kind of contingency. He changed his appearance as much as was practical. He did not use any phone connected to his identity. He did not contact anyone in his organization directly because he understood immediately that his organization was the most dangerous place he could reach toward right now. Every member of it who had been arrested was a potential source of information, and the FBI was very good at finding the softest point in a network and pressing on it until something gave. He watched his world collapse from a distance. From a small safe house in a residential neighborhood far from the mansion, he sat with a prepaid phone and watched the news and saw his organization being dismantled in real time. Arrests he recognized. Locations he knew being raided. Names being named in press conferences by government officials who 6 months ago would not have said those names out loud in a private room. The architecture of everything he had spent 20 years building was being taken apart with a speed and a thoroughness that told him the information being used to dismantle it was not coming from surveillance alone. Someone inside was talking. He did not know yet who. On the second day, he moved safe houses again. On the third day, he moved a second time. He was running out of locations that he trusted completely, and the circle of people he could rely on was shrinking with every arrest that scrolled across the news feed on his prepaid phone. He ate very little. He slept in short intervals. He sat in the silence of other people's rooms, and he thought about Ngozi, and he thought about the locked room, and he thought about the footage of Mama Agnes at the back door, and he thought about all of it with the particular controlled fury of a man who does not allow himself to be seen losing control even when there is nobody watching. On the third day, one of his mid-level men broke. He was not one of the inner circle. He was not someone the Mafia Boss had ever fully trusted with the most sensitive information. But he knew enough. He had been arrested in the first wave of raids, and he had spent 36 hours in an interrogation room facing a lifetime of consequences for his involvement in an organization that was now the subject of an international criminal investigation, and he had done the calculation that people do when the math stops working in favor of loyalty and starts working in favor of survival. He gave them the address of the safe house. The FBI moved within the hour. No announcement. No press. No convoy of vehicles that would give 30 seconds of warning to someone watching from a window. Just 4 vehicles moving through Seoul traffic with the deliberate, unremarkable pace of people who do not want to be noticed until it is too late to matter. They parked 2 streets away. They approached on foot. They positioned themselves at every exit of the building before anyone knocked on any door. Then one agent walked to the front entrance of the safe house and knocked. There was a pause of approximately 15 seconds. Then the door opened. He looked different already. The perfectly tailored suit was gone. Dark trousers. Plain jacket. The kind of clothing designed to make a man look like nobody in particular. His hair was less precisely arranged than it had ever been in any photograph or security footage anyone had ever seen of him. He looked like a version of himself that had been left out in weather. But the eyes were the same. Those dark, commanding eyes that had evaluated a room full of women in a Seoul location 8 years ago, and found one woman whose defiance had stopped him mid-stride. Those eyes looked at the FBI agent on his doorstep and then moved past her to the agents positioned at either side of the door, and then to the vehicles visible at the end of the street, and he completed his assessment in approximately 3 seconds the way he had always assessed situations, and he understood completely what he was looking at. He stepped back from the door. He allowed them to enter. He did not run. He did not argue. He did not make any of the phone calls or signals or movements that his men had been trained to watch for as indicators that a situation required escalation. He simply stepped back from the door and put his hands where they could be seen and waited for what came next with the particular composure of a man who has decided that if this moment was coming, then he was going to meet it standing up. They put the handcuffs on him in the entryway of a safe house in a residential neighborhood in Seoul, while the news on a television somewhere in the building was running a continuous loop of his own face and the story of 3 girls from Lagos. He did not look at the television. He was taken to a vehicle and driven through the city and processed with the particular thoroughness that international criminal cases require, and he said nothing through any of it. Not one word. Not to the officers who handled his processing. Not to the agents who escorted him. Not to the cameras that were somehow already waiting outside the facility when they arrived because someone had leaked the arrest and the press had moved faster than anyone anticipated. He looked at none of it. He was placed in an interrogation room. A metal table, 2 chairs, fluorescent lighting that had been specifically designed to be uncomfortable in its brightness. A one-way mirror on the far wall. He sat down in the chair on the far side of the table and he folded his hands on the metal surface and he looked at the wall and he did not speak. 2 FBI investigators entered. They sat down across from him. They introduced themselves. He did not respond. They began. For the first 2 hours he said nothing. Not silence in the sense of someone who has run out of things to say. Silence as a weapon. The same silence he had used in every difficult room he had ever sat in. The silence that said, I have been in rooms like this before and I know that the person who speaks first loses something and I have no intention of losing anything in this room today. The investigators were patient. They had worked cases like this before and they understood that the first 2 hours of silence were not a wall but a test. They were being evaluated the same way he evaluated everything. They let him evaluate. They laid evidence on the table methodically. Photographs, documents, financial records, names and dates and locations that told a story so complete and so thoroughly documented that the silence across the table from them became less a weapon and more a delay. Then the interrogation changed. The audience does not need to see every detail of what happened in that room over the hours that followed. Some things are better understood through their results than their process. What the audience needs to know is that the man who walked into that interrogation room composed and controlled and certain that silence was his best protection did not stay that way. He broke. Not dramatically. Not with tears or rage or any of the performances that breaking produces in people who have never had to do it before. He broke the way structures break under sustained pressure. Gradually and then completely. He began to talk in the particular voice of a man who has finally run the calculation and arrived at a number that changes everything. He gave them names, locations, operations in Seoul that they had not yet identified, financial networks, shell companies, the full architecture of an organization that had been moving people across borders for 15 years. And then he gave them Epha. He told them the city in Japan, the organization, the address of the building. He gave it the way he gave everything else. As information, as currency, as the thing he still had that they wanted most. The FBI investigator sitting across from him picked up her phone before he had finished the sentence. She was already dialing Tokyo. The flight from Seoul to Tokyo takes approximately 2.5 hours. The FBI team that boarded that flight did not use those 2.5 hours to sleep or eat or do any of the things that people do on flights when time is a luxury rather than a countdown. They used them to go over the building layout that Korean intelligence had pulled within 40 minutes of the address being confirmed. 3 floors, 12 rooms, 2 stairwells, 1 service entrance at the back. The organization operating out of it had been on Japanese law enforcement's peripheral radar for several years without ever quite becoming the focus of a dedicated operation. That was about to change. They landed at Haneda at 4 a.m. Japanese law enforcement was already waiting. The coordination between the 2 agencies had happened at a speed that bureaucracy rarely permits, but that political pressure from 2 governments responding to an international story that was now being covered on every major news platform in the world had made possible. When Kechi's video reached the United States networks, it had stopped being a Korean story and become something that required a faster kind of response than the one that normal channels produced. They moved on the building at 5:30 a.m. when the city was still dark and the streets around the quiet residential neighborhood were empty enough that the approach could be made without the kind of civilian presence that complicated operations like this one. 4 entry points. Simultaneous. The same coordinated precision that had been used on the Seoul mansion scaled down to a 3-story residential building in a Tokyo neighborhood that looked from the outside like nothing more than an ordinary block of flats. They went in fast and they went in completely. The ground floor was cleared in under 3 minutes. The second floor in 4. By the time the team reached the 3rd floor stairwell, the building was already secure at every level below them and the only direction left was up. 3rd floor. A narrow corridor. For doors. The team moved down it methodically. The first door. Clear. The second door. Clear. The 3rd door was locked from the outside with the kind of heavy external lock that has only one explanation for its existence on a residential building. They looked at it for 1 second. Then they opened it. The room was small and dim. A single mattress on the floor. A window that had been covered from the outside so that no natural light entered. A smell that spoke of a space that had been closed for a long time around a human being who had not had access to the things that human beings need. The kind of room that exists in the world and that most people never see and that those who do see never entirely forget. Epha was on the mattress. She was lying on her side facing the wall. She was so still that for one terrible fraction of a second the female officer who entered first thought the worst. Then she saw the shallow movement of breathing. Small. Labored. But there. She crossed the room in 3 steps and crouched down beside the mattress. Epha's body was painfully thin. The warm medium brown skin that had glowed in every memory Ngozi and Kechi carried of her had a grayness to it now, the particular color that arrives when a body has been deprived of the things it needs for too long. Her natural hair had grown out from the 2-strand twists she had worn the night the truck left Lagos, and it was matted and uncombed and pressed flat against the side of her face. Her hands in front of her face were small and still, and the nails were broken on 2 fingers. She looked like someone who had been surviving 1 hour at a time for 2 years with nothing to sustain the survival except the most fundamental and unreasonable human refusal to stop. The officer reached out and very gently placed her hand on Epha's shoulder. Epha's eyes opened. They were the same eyes. That was the thing that hit the officer first and that she would describe later in her report in language that was more personal than official reports usually permitted. The same eyes. Large and soft and dark. The eyes of the gentle one. The one who laughed the loudest and cried at small things and remembered everyone's birthday. 8 years had done everything they could to those eyes and they were still the same eyes underneath all of it. Still warm. Still there. Still Epha. They focused slowly on the officer's face. Epha, the officer said. Her voice was quiet and completely steady. My name is Agent Park. You are safe. We are taking you home. Epha stared at her. She had heard things in that room before. Voices. Instructions. Sounds that required responses she had learned to produce automatically in order to make the voices stop. This was a different kind of voice. It was speaking in English, which was the language of a life before this room. It was saying words she had not allowed herself to think in a very long time because thinking them and not having them be true was a specific kind of damage she could not afford. Safe. Home. She kept looking at the officer's face. Looking for the thing that would tell her this was something her mind had constructed out of desperation the way minds do when they have been in a room too long. The officer did not look away. She held Epha's gaze with the steady patience of someone who understood that trust in this moment could not be commanded. It had to be waited for. Then Epha closed her eyes. And the tears that came were completely silent. Not the crying of someone releasing something. The crying of someone whose body has received information that contradicts everything it has been calibrated to expect, and does not yet know how to process the contradiction except through tears that fall without sound because the sound ran out a long time ago. They were the tears of someone who had stopped believing rescue was coming. Who had made a private peace with the possibility that the room was permanent. Who had found a place inside herself that the room could not reach and had lived in that place for 2 years and called it enough because enough was all that was available. And now something was reaching through all of that. Reaching in and saying it was over. It took her body several minutes to begin to believe it. They brought a stretcher. They lifted her onto it with the specific care that people use when handling something that has been through more than it was designed to handle. They carried her out of that room and down the corridor and down the stairs and through the ground floor and out of the front door of the building and into the Tokyo morning. The air hit her face first. cold and clean and moving the way outside air moves, with the particular aliveness of something that has not been contained. She felt it on her skin and something in her face changed. Something that had been held very carefully in a fixed position for a very long time loosened slightly. Not all the way, not yet, but enough to be visible to the officer walking beside the stretcher, who was watching her face with the attention of someone whose job it is to notice the difference between a person who is present and a person who has gone somewhere inside themselves and left only the body behind. She was present. She was thin and exhausted and damaged in ways that would take years to fully understand and address. But she was present. She was looking at the Tokyo sky with the particular expression of someone encountering something they had given up expecting to see again, and finding that it still exists exactly as they left it. The sky was still there. It had been there the whole time. She was carried to a vehicle and taken to a hospital, and the doctors who received her began the work of understanding what 2 years in that room had done to her body and what it was going to take to undo it. The Japanese trafficking operation was dismantled in the same day. Every member of the organization operating out of that building was arrested. Every other person found in that building was removed to safety and placed in government care. It was the fastest and most complete operation of its kind that the joint FBI and Japanese law enforcement task force had ever executed, and the speed of it was entirely due to a 26-year-old Nigerian woman sitting on a mat in a room above a laundry shop in Idiwan who had looked into a phone camera and told the truth without flinching. 3 months passed. They passed the way months pass when the immediate emergency is over and what remains is the long, quiet work of recovery. Ngozi and Mama Agnes had been placed in a government care facility in Seoul immediately after the raid. They had been given medical attention and safe rooms and meals and the particular careful treatment that governments provide when they are also managing a story that the entire world is watching. Ngozi gave birth in the 4th week. In a government care hospital room in Seoul, Korea, on a Tuesday evening, she brought 2 lives into the world. A boy and a girl. Twin children born to a woman who had been taken at 18 years old and had fought her way back to herself across 8 years of silence and 2 weeks of being hunted through the streets of a foreign city while 7 months pregnant. The boy came first. She held him and looked at his face and saw his father's eyes looking back at her from the face of a child who had done nothing to deserve either his father's world or his mother's suffering, and who deserved instead everything she had fought to give him. She named him Ejiofor. I am victorious. The girl came 12 minutes later. She held them both at the same time in that hospital room and felt the specific weight of 2 human beings who were entirely hers and entirely new and entirely innocent of everything that had preceded their arrival in the world. They had his eyes. Both of them. The same dark almond-shaped eyes that had looked at her across 8 years of cold marriage, and across a courtroom she had not yet sat in, and across the glass of a prison visitation room she had not yet visited. His eyes in her children's faces. She looked at those eyes for a long time. Then she made a decision that she never revisited and never regretted. Those eyes were the only thing of his they were going to carry. Everything else about them was going to be hers. Their names, their language, their understanding of where they came from and what their mother had survived to put them in a world where they could choose their own direction. All of it hers. She named the girl a wheel. Pathway. Ejiofor and a wheel. Victorious and Pathway. Named in a government care hospital room in Seoul by a woman from Lagos who had been taken at 18 and was now 26 and had arrived at this room and these children through a journey that no name could fully contain, but that these 2 names came closer to containing than anything else available in any of the 4 languages she now spoke. 6 weeks after the birth, Epha was strong enough to travel. The doctors in Tokyo had worked steadily through those 6 weeks, and what they found when they began was extensive, and what they achieved by the end of it was not a restoration of what had been but a foundation for what could be built. Epha ate. Epha slept in a real bed. Epha had conversations with a therapist who spoke both English and Yoruba and who sat with her 3 times a week in a bright room with a window that looked out over a Tokyo garden and let her decide what she was ready to talk about and what she was not ready for yet, and honored the difference without pressure. By the 6th week she was walking without assistance and eating 3 full meals and sleeping through the night more often than not. They arranged her transfer to Seoul, to the government care facility where Ngozi and Kechi were staying, to the same building, the same floor, a room 3 doors down from the room where Ngozi had spent 6 weeks learning how to hold 2 babies simultaneously and sleep in the spaces between their needs and begin the very first tentative steps of imagining what a life that was not defined by survival might feel like. On the morning Epha arrived, Nkechi was standing in the corridor outside Ngozi's room. She had been told the transfer was happening today, and she had been standing in that corridor for 40 minutes before the elevator at the end of the hall opened. Epha walked out of it slowly. She was thin still, fragile still. The kind of fragile that is not weakness but the specific vulnerability of something that has been through tremendous force and is still standing but needs careful handling while it finds its full strength again. She was wearing clean clothes that the government facility had provided. Her hair had been carefully washed and was growing out in a soft natural cloud around her face. She looked up and saw Nkechi. Nkechi put both hands over her mouth. Then the door to Ngozi's room opened and Ngozi stepped into the corridor with a Jimafor in one arm and a wheel in the other, and she looked at the end of the corridor and she saw Epha standing there and Epha saw her, and for one full breathless moment the corridor held all three of them in the particular suspended stillness of a universe that is about to put something back together that should never have been taken apart. Then they came together. All three of them in the middle of that corridor. Ngozi with the babies between them. Nkechi's arms around both of them. Epha's face against Ngozi's shoulder shaking with the specific trembling of a body that has finally put down something it has been carrying alone for too long and does not yet know how to stand without the weight of it. They slid down to the floor together. All three of them. On the floor of a government care corridor in Seoul, Korea with a Jimafor and a wheel between them looking up at the ceiling with the wide uncomprehending eyes of babies who do not yet know what the arms holding them have been through to get them here. Ngozi was crying. Nkechi was crying. Epha was shaking and crying and holding on with both hands the way you hold on to something you gave up expecting to ever touch again. These were the three girls from Lagos who had held each other's hands on a truck going somewhere terrible at 18 years old. And they were holding each other again now, 8 years older, scarred in ways that would take years to fully map, changed beyond recognition by everything that had happened between that truck and this floor, but together, still together, after everything, still together. 6 months is both a long time and not long enough. It is long enough for two babies to learn that the world contains warmth and that the arms holding them are safe and that the sound of a particular voice means everything is going to be okay. It is long enough for a woman's body to begin to remember what it felt like before 2 years in a locked room in Tokyo. It is long enough for three women who were taken at 18 to sit in rooms with lawyers and investigators and government officials and go over everything that happened to them with the methodical thoroughness that building an airtight international criminal case requires. It is not long enough to undo any of it. Nothing is long enough for that. But 6 months is enough to build something that functions like a foundation and to stand on it and walk into a courtroom and tell the truth one final time in a room where the truth has consequences. The Seoul Court of Justice on the morning of the hearing was full in the way that rooms are full when the story being told inside them has been watched by the entire world. Media representatives from Korea and Nigeria and the United States and a dozen other countries filled the press gallery. Government officials occupied rows that were usually empty at hearings of this kind. Advocates and representatives from international organizations working on the issues at the center of this case sat in sections that had been specifically reserved for them. The public gallery was full before the doors opened at 8 in the morning and had been full since 6. At the front of the room, 3 Nigerian women sat side by side. Ngozi, Nkechi, Epha. They were dressed in the particular way that people dress when they want to communicate to a room full of strangers that what happened to them did not finish them. Cleanly, carefully, with the quiet dignity of women who have decided that this room and this day belong to them and they are going to occupy it accordingly. Beside them, Mama Agnes sat in a formal dress that the government had helped her acquire for the occasion. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and her back straight and her eyes forward, and she looked like exactly what she was. A woman of 62 who had worked inside a criminal's household for 11 years and had used the last of those years to do the most important thing she had ever done, and who was sitting in this courtroom to watch the consequences of that choice play out in the only language that mattered. Justice. In the row directly behind them, a government-appointed caregiver sat with a Jimafor and a wheel, wrapped in soft blankets. Completely unaware of the significance of the room they had been brought into but present in it nonetheless. Present the way that new life is always present in rooms where old wrongs are finally being addressed. As proof that something survived. As evidence that the story did not end where it was supposed to end. The case had been building for 6 months on a foundation of evidence so comprehensive that the defense teams representing the various accused had spent most of that time in the particular legal posture of people who know the outcome and are managing the terms rather than contesting the facts. The testimony of the 3 women was delivered over 3 days. Each of them sat in the witness position and spoke in English with a court interpreter rendering their words into Korean in real time, and they told what had happened to them with the quiet, devastating clarity of people who have been waiting a very long time to say these things in a room where saying them produces something more than sympathy. The courtroom was silent during all of it. Not the polite silence of people trying to appear respectful. The genuine silence of people who have stopped thinking about anything except what they are hearing. The head of the trafficking organization was sentenced first. The judge read the charges and the evidence and the scope of the operation and the number of women identified as victims across 15 years of activity, and then she read the sentence, and the word she used was the most final word available in the Korean legal system, and the courtroom received it in silence, and Ngozi looked at the man in the dock when it was read and felt something she had not expected to feel, which was nothing. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Not the rush of vindication that she had imagined might come with this moment. Just nothing. The flat, empty nothing of a conclusion that was correct and necessary and that changed exactly nothing about what had already happened. His lieutenants were sentenced in sequence. 20 years. 30 years. 35. 40. The numbers accumulated in the room, and each one represented something real, and each one was correct, and each one landed in the room without ceremony because there was no ceremony appropriate to the accounting of this particular debt. Then they brought him in. The room changed when he entered. Not dramatically. Not with the kind of visible reaction that a film would give it. Just a subtle collective attention shift. The particular quality of silence in a room altering slightly when the person everyone has been waiting for finally appears. He looked different. The tailored suit was gone. A prison uniform had replaced it. The short, neatly parted hair was slightly longer and less precisely arranged. The broad shoulders were the same, but they carried themselves differently now. Not with the absolute authority of a man who owns every room he enters, but with the contained, careful posture of a man who has spent 6 months in custody learning what it feels like to have the rooms chosen for him. The scar on his left cheekbone was the same. The dark almond eyes were the same. But the power was different. Not gone. Not entirely. Men like him do not lose what they are simply because the circumstances change. But it was different. Diminished in the specific way that power is diminished when the structures that sustain it have been removed. He was still the most commanding presence in that courtroom. He was just commanding it from the wrong side of the dock. He sat down. The judge read the charges. Took a long time. The list was extensive, and each item on it was specific and documented and supported by evidence that had been gathered from his own mansion and his own organization and the testimony of the women sitting in the front row of that courtroom. Trafficking, false imprisonment, conspiracy, organized crime, coercion. The list continued past the point where most people in the room had stopped counting and started simply absorbing the cumulative weight of it. Then the sentence. 50 years. The courtroom reacted. Not with chaos. With the collective exhale of a room full of people who have been holding something in for a long time and have just been given permission to release it. Voices. Movement. The press gallery erupting into the particular controlled urgency of journalists who have a story to file. The public gallery buzzing with the sound of people turning to the people beside them. The Mafia Boss did not react. He sat completely still in the dock, and he looked at the judge, and he did not move, and he did not speak, and his expression did not change in any way that was visible from the press gallery or the public gallery or anywhere except the front row of that courtroom, where one woman was close enough and knew his face well enough to see the thing that happened behind his eyes in the 3 seconds after the sentence was read. She saw it. She had always been able to see the things that happened behind his eyes. 8 years of studying a face that never showed anything had made her fluent in the language of what it was hiding. He turned his head. He looked directly at Ngozi. She was already looking at him. There it was again. That specific exchange. The one that had been happening between them since a room in Seoul 8 years ago, when he had walked toward her, and she had looked back at him, and neither of them had looked away first. It had happened across 8 years of cold marriage. It had happened across a bedroom doorframe at midnight. It had happened in a study when she stood in front of him 7 months pregnant and refused to give him the fear he was reaching for. It was happening now across a courtroom while a judge's voice was still settling into the room with the weight of 50 years. He looked at her with those dark eyes and she looked back at him with hers, and everything that had ever existed between them and everything that had never existed between them and everything that might have existed in a completely different version of events that had never been available to either of them was present in that exchange, and then it was over. He looked away. He had always looked away first. The divorce papers were brought forward immediately after the sentencing. His lawyer placed them on the surface in front of him with the particular careful neutrality of a man doing a job he has been paid to do without expressing any personal opinion about it. Pen beside them. The Mafia Boss looked at the papers for a moment. Then he picked up the pen. He did not hesitate. He did not look at Ngozi. He did not make any of the gestures or pauses or small performances that people sometimes make when signing something significant in order to communicate that they understand its significance. He simply signed his name in the place indicated and put the pen down and sat back. And just like that, 8 years of a marriage that was never really a marriage, and a life that was never really a life, and a home that was never really a home was over on a piece of paper in a Seoul courtroom. Ngozi looked down at the signed papers in front of her. She exhaled. One long, slow breath that she had been holding for 8 years finally leaving her body completely. She did not feel what she had expected to feel. She had imagined this moment in the locked room and in the government care facility and in the hospital room where she held a gymophore and a wheel for the first time, and she had imagined it would feel like victory. Like the specific triumphant arrival of a thing she had fought for and finally reached. Felt like putting something down. Something very heavy that she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what her hands felt like without the weight of it. She stood up slowly from the front row of that courtroom, and her hands were empty and they felt unfamiliar that way, and she stood there for a moment just experiencing the unfamiliarity of empty hands before she turned and found Nkechi and Epha on either side of her, and she took both of their hands in hers and held them, and her hands were not empty anymore. They never would be again. Across the city in a neighborhood she had never visited and would never visit again, a Korean woman was standing on a pavement outside a building she no longer had access to. The locks had been changed by government order as part of the asset freezing that followed the arrest. Her cards had been declined since the morning after the raid. The phone numbers she had been calling for 6 months were either disconnected or answered by strangers who had no idea who she was asking for. The car was gone. The accounts were gone. The connections were gone. Every door that had been open because of him was closed, and the particular thing about doors that close because of someone else is that you cannot open them from the outside no matter how long you stand in front of them. She stood outside that building with 2 bags at her feet, and she looked at the door that would not open for her, and she understood for the first time what it meant to have built a life on a foundation that belonged to someone else. When the foundation was taken, the life went with it. Every single piece of it. The Seoul Incheon Airport on a Thursday morning moved with the particular energy of a place that exists entirely in the space between departures and arrivals. People moving toward gates with the focused urgency of those who have somewhere to be. People standing at arrivals barriers with the particular quality of attention that waiting for someone you love produces. The announcements overhead in Korean and English and Japanese cycling through their destinations with the mechanical indifference of a system that does not distinguish between ordinary journeys and the ones that mark the end of something enormous. Mama Agnes stood at the departure gate in her best clothes. She had 1 bag. Everything she owned in the world that mattered fit inside it comfortably, which was the kind of fact that might have seemed sad in different circumstances, but which in these circumstances felt like exactly the right amount. She had her documents. She had her ticket paid for by the Korean government as part of the reparations process that had been moving through its official channels since the court case concluded. She had the small photograph from the shelf in her staff room that the officers had retrieved for her when they went back to the mansion to collect the personal belongings of the people who had been held there against their will. 3 girls on a Lego street, 18 years old, laughing. She had asked for that photograph specifically. Nobody had questioned why. All 3 girls were there to see her off. They stood together at the departure gate in the way they had learned to stand together in the months since the government care facility. Close, always within arm's reach of each other. As if the 8 years of distance had recalibrated something in all 3 of them so that proximity was no longer a preference but a requirement. A caregiver stood slightly behind them with a gymophore and a wheel in a double carrier. The twins awake and looking at the airport with the wide, uncritical attention of 4-month-old babies encountering a large, bright space for the first time. Mama Agnes looked at all of them. She looked at Nkechi first. at the sharp, intelligent face that had been watching everything since Lagos, at the eyes that had cataloged every exit and every guard rotation and every broken window lock with the patience of someone who understood that survival was not luck but preparation. She looked at the woman Kechi had become across 8 years of enduring the unendurable, and she thought about the video. About a 26-year-old Nigerian woman sitting on a mat on a floor in Idiwan with a prepaid phone and looking into its camera without flinching and saying everything that needed to be said. She thought about what that courage had cost and what it had produced, and she felt for Nkechi the specific pride that belongs to people who watch someone they love do the hardest thing. She looked at Epha, still thin, still fragile in the careful way of something that is rebuilding rather than broken, but present in a way she had not been when they first brought her from Tokyo. The softness was coming back into her face, slowly, the way color comes back into something that has been kept from light for too long. It was not complete. It would not be complete for a long time. But it was happening, and Mama Agnes could see it happening, and seeing it was one of the best things she had seen in 11 years. Then she looked at Ngozi. She had been saving Ngozi for last, the way you save the most important thing for when you are fully ready to receive it. 26 years old. Standing straight the way she had always stood straight. Diamond drop earrings back in her ears. Her wig back on her head. A Jimafor and a wheel in the carrier behind her. Divorced. Free. Standing in Seoul Incheon Airport on a Thursday morning with her whole life in front of her, and the particular expression of a woman who has not yet fully absorbed that fact but is beginning to. Mama Agnes crossed to her. Ngozi took both of her hands before she got there. She held them and looked at them. These hands. These strong work-worn hands that had cooked 10,000 meals and cleaned 10,000 floors and drawn an escape route in pencil on a small piece of paper and pressed an envelope of cash into a young woman's palm in a dark kitchen corridor and unlocked a back door at 12:04 a.m. and held a young woman's face one final time before sending her out into the Seoul night. She held these hands for a long time, and she could not find words. She had 4 languages and none of them contained what she was trying to say, and she stood there with Mama Agnes's hands in hers, and her throat closed around everything she was trying to find a way to give her. Mama Agnes waited. She had always been good at waiting. Finally Ngozi found the only sentence that was both true and large enough. "You saved my life," she said. Her voice was steady and direct, the way her voice always was. "You saved my children's lives. I will never stop saying your name." Mama Agnes looked at her for a long moment. Then she did what she had always done when words were insufficient for a moment. She reached up and she took Ngozi's face in both her old hands. The same hands. The same gesture. The back corridor of the mansion at 12:04 a.m. This departure gate in Seoul Incheon Airport. The same hands. The same face. Everything different. Everything the same. She held it for a long moment. Then she turned to the caregiver and she looked at the twins in the carrier. Ejiofor was awake. His dark eyes, his father's eyes and his mother's face, were looking up at the ceiling of the airport with the particular focus of a baby who has decided that whatever is up there is worth sustained attention. Mama Agnes reached out one finger and he looked down from the ceiling and found her finger, and his hand closed around it with the complete trusting grip of someone who has not yet learned to be careful about what they hold on to. She looked at his face for a long time. "Ejiofor," she said quietly. "Victorious." She said the word like it was a full sentence, like it contained everything it needed to contain without anything else added to it. Then she looked at a wheel. The girl was asleep, her round face and her soft features completely at rest. Mama Agnes touched her cheek with one finger so lightly it barely disturbed the air around her. "A wheel," she said. "Pathway." The same way. A full sentence. Complete thing. She picked up her bag. She looked at all 3 of them one final time. All 3 girls from Lagos standing together in Seoul Incheon Airport, having survived everything the world had put between them and this moment. She looked at them with the particular look of a woman who has no regrets and knows it completely and finds in that knowledge a peace that nothing can disturb. Then she turned and walked toward the departure gate. She did not look back, because Mama Agnes had always understood something that took most people a lifetime to learn. That the bravest thing you can do after holding someone through their storm is trust them to walk in the sunshine without you. That holding on past the moment when someone is ready to go is not love. It is need dressed up as love. And she had never once in her life confused the two. She walked through that gate and she was gone. Ngozi stood at the departure barrier and watched the space where Mama Agnes had been for a long time after she disappeared. Then she felt Nkechi's hand find hers on the left and Epha's hand find hers on the right, and she stood between them the way she had stood between them on a truck going somewhere terrible 8 years ago, and she held on. The Korean government arranged 3 flights to Lagos, Nigeria. They landed on a Saturday afternoon when the city was loud and alive and completely indifferent to the significance of what was landing in it, which was exactly right. Lagos did not do ceremony. Lagos did arrival. The noise and the heat and the color and the smell of it hit all 3 of them through the aircraft door before they had finished deplaning, and it hit them the way home hits people who have been away long enough to have forgotten that they remembered it this specifically. They remembered everything. The reunions happened the way the most important reunions happen. Without preparation. Without the careful choreography that people arrange when they know something significant is coming. Just the arrival of a face that a body has been missing for 8 years, producing in that body a response that bypasses every layer of composure and goes directly to the part that has been waiting since the truck left on a Thursday night. Ngozi's mother had never stopped leaving a light on. That was the detail that undid Ngozi completely. She had been steady through the airport and steady through the drive and steady through the gate of the family compound, and then she saw the light in the window and she understood that it had been on every night for 8 years, and something in her that had survived everything by staying steady finally stopped being steady, and she crossed that compound in 10 steps and her mother's arms came around her and everything that was left of the 8 years came out of her in the particular way that things come out of people who have been holding them in front of their mothers for the first time. Her mother held her. She did not say anything for a very long time. She just held her daughter and her daughter's children, and she held on with the specific grip of a woman who has been reaching for something for 8 years and has finally found it, and has absolutely no intention of letting go until she is completely certain it is real. Nkechi's father had aged 10 years in 8. She saw it immediately when she walked through his door. The lines in his face. The gray that had not been there. The way he moved across the room toward her with a slowness that was not age but caution. The caution of a man who had been told painful things about hope over the course of 8 years, and had learned to move carefully around anything that looked like it might be hope again. Then she reached him. And he held his daughter, and he was not careful anymore. Epha's siblings had grown up while she was gone. The younger brother, who had been 10, was now 18. He was taller than her. He stood in the doorway of their mother's house and looked at her with the particular expression of someone encountering a person they know completely from memory and from a face in a photograph, and are now being asked to reconcile with the actual person standing in front of them, who is both exactly as remembered and entirely different from what was remembered. He stepped forward. He put his arms around his sister. He said her name. That was enough. The government compensation arrived in the weeks that followed. The transfers were completed and the families were settled, and for the first time in their lives 3 women from Lagos had financial security and the freedom that comes with it, the specific freedom of being able to make choices based on what they wanted rather than what they needed to survive. They spent 16 months in Lagos, healing, breathing, eating their mother's food and sleeping in their childhood beds, and sitting in compounds in the Lagos evening listening to the sounds of the neighborhood they had grown up in and remembering who they were before the truck. Discovering who they had become after everything since. Finding that the 2 versions of themselves were not as far apart as they had feared. That the girl who had argued with market traders and one was still inside the woman who had survived a trafficking location and a cold marriage and a locked room and a soul courtroom. That she had been there the whole time. Ngozi watched a Jimafor and a wheel grow in Lagos sunlight. She watched them learn to roll and then to sit and then to pull themselves upright against the furniture with the fierce determined concentration of small people discovering that their bodies can do more than they previously knew. She watched them take their first steps on Nigerian soil in her mother's compound with the family gathered around them, encouraging every wobbling attempt with the particular joyful noise that Lagos families make when something worth celebrating is happening. She watched their father's eyes in their faces every single day. She stored everything. Every detail, every question she knew they were going to ask one day, every piece of the story she was going to have to find a way to tell them when they were old enough to hold it. She stored it all carefully the way she stored everything important. Against the day she would need it. 16 months passed. Then the 3 women sat together in Ngozi's mother's compound on a Lagos evening, and they talked about what came next. About the money and the freedom and the whole lives that were sitting in front of them waiting to be decided. About the places they had been and the places they had not yet been and the place they had heard about from the FBI agents and the government officials and the advocates who had worked their case. A place where people who had survived things started over. A place where starting over was almost a national tradition. America. They booked 3 flights to Atlanta, Georgia, and they landed on a Tuesday morning, and the city received them the way cities receive people who have decided to build something in them. Without ceremony. Without acknowledgement. With the simple availability of space and possibility that is the only welcome a city needs to offer. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Atlanta, Georgia received them the way it receives everyone who arrives with nothing but intention and the particular hunger of people who have decided that whatever comes next is going to be chosen rather than endured. The city did not make a fuss about their arrival. It simply made room the way Atlanta has always made room, with the particular generosity of a place that has been built by people who came from somewhere difficult and decided to build something beautiful anyway. They found an apartment in a neighborhood on the southwest side of the city where the streets were lined with trees that turned gold in the autumn, and where the smell of someone's cooking was always coming from somewhere, and where the sound of music from open windows on a Saturday afternoon was so consistent it felt less like an accident and more like a community agreement. A 3-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor with a balcony that looked out over a street that was alive without being loud. They stood on that balcony on the first evening and looked at the Atlanta skyline in the distance, and nobody said anything for a long time because sometimes the right response to something good is silence. The first morning Ngozi woke up in that apartment, she lay still for several minutes before she opened her eyes. She was waiting for the thing that had always been there when she woke up in the mansion. The weight, the specific gravity of a life that was happening to her rather than being lived by her. She lay still and she waited for it, and it did not come, and the not coming of it was so unfamiliar that she had to open her eyes and look at the ceiling of a room she had chosen and breathe the air of a city she had chosen to confirm that it was real. It was real. She got up and she went to the kitchen and she made tea the way her mother made it in Lagos, and she stood on the balcony in the Atlanta morning and she drank it and she watched the street below begin to wake up, and she felt something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten it had a name. Peace. Not the absence of danger. Not the temporary pause between one difficult thing and the next. Peace. The real kind. The kind that lives in the body rather than just the mind. The kind that makes a cup of tea on a balcony in the morning feel like the most significant luxury in the world because you understand completely what it cost to get here. In the weeks that followed, they discovered the city the way people discover cities when they have the time and the freedom to do it properly. Not as tourists moving between landmarks, but as people learning the texture of a place they intend to inhabit. They found a black hair salon 3 blocks from the apartment run by a woman from Alabama named Miss Dora, who had been doing hair on that street for 22 years, and who took one look at all 3 of them and said, "Honey, sit down," and proceeded to give each of them the most thorough and satisfying hair appointment of their lives while talking continuously about everything and nothing with the warm, unstoppable energy of a woman who understood that a hair salon is never really just a hair salon. They found a church on a Sunday morning by following the sound of a choir through an open window and walking through a door they had not planned to walk through, and sitting in the back row of a Baptist congregation that sang with the full body commitment of people who meant every word, and being so undone by the sound of it that all 3 of them were crying before the first song finished, and the woman sitting next to Nkechi quietly handed her a tissue without making a fuss about it, which was exactly the right response. They started a business. It was Nkechi's idea. She had been thinking about it since Atlanta. A catering business. Nigerian food. The specific recipes they had grown up eating in Lagos, the jollof rice and the egusi soup and the puff puff and the chin chin and all the food that had been a language before it was a meal. They registered the business in month 3 using part of their compensation money, and they called it 3 Girls from Lagos, which was exactly what it was, and they started small, doing catering for community events and church functions and house parties in the Nigerian neighborhood, and word spread the way word spreads in communities where good food is a serious matter. Within 6 months they had more bookings than they could comfortably manage, and they were turning down work and laughing about it in the kitchen at midnight while they prepped for the next day's order, and the twins were asleep in their room, and Atlanta was quiet outside the window, and the business that had started as an idea was becoming something real. A gym of 4 and a wheel grew. They grew in the specific accelerated way of toddlers for whom every week brings something new to the world. New words. New abilities. New opinions about everything delivered with the complete conviction of people who have not yet learned to doubt themselves. They were beautiful children, their Korean features clear and unmistakable in their faces. Their father's almond-shaped eyes looking out at Atlanta with the same sharp attention those eyes had always directed at the world. Their hair was worn in the neat, precise Korean style that Ngozi had chosen for them deliberately and maintained carefully, clean lines and perfect precision that made them look simultaneously like the most Korean children in Atlanta and the most Nigerian. Both things completely, neither thing less than fully. People stopped Ngozi in supermarkets to ask about them. She told them the names every time. Ejiofor, a wheel, Victorious and Pathway. She watched people receive those names and feel them, and she felt every time the quiet satisfaction of having named something correctly. It was in month 7 that Ngozi met Darius. He was at a community fundraiser that 3 girls from Lagos was catering. A tall black American man in his late 30s, a cardiologist at Emory University Hospital, who came back to the food table 3 times in the first hour and on the 3rd time looked at Ngozi behind the table and said with complete directness that he was not entirely sure if he kept coming back for the jollof rice or for the woman serving it, and that he thought she deserved to know that. Ngozi looked at him for a moment. Then she served him a 4th portion and told him he was going to have to figure that out himself. He laughed. It was a real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere genuine and arrives without performance. She noticed it. She filed it in the part of her that had spent years learning to distinguish between what was real and what was constructed, and this was real. He asked for her number. She gave it to him 2 weeks later when he came back to another event they were catering, and she had had enough time to watch how he moved through a room and how he treated the staff and how he listened when other people spoke and what his face did when he thought nobody was watching, and what she saw in all of those observations was consistent and good. They went to dinner first at a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta that he chose because he had asked Miss Dora at the hair salon what kind of place would be right, and Miss Dora had given him very specific instructions which he had followed exactly. They talked for 4 hours and the food went cold twice because neither of them wanted to stop the conversation long enough to eat properly. He asked her questions and listened to the answers. Not the polite listening of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but the real kind. The kind where you can see the other person absorbing what you are saying and letting it matter to them. He did not ask about her past. Not that night. Not because he was not curious, but because he understood instinctively that a woman's story is hers to give on her own terms in her own time, and his job on this particular night was simply to be someone she might want to give it to eventually. She noticed that too. They went to Piedmont Park on a Sunday afternoon with Ejiofor and a wheel, and Darius brought a blanket and food from a Nigerian restaurant he had researched specifically because he wanted to get it right, and he sat on the grass with 2 Korean featured toddlers with Nigerian names, and he was completely natural with them in the way that people are either naturally capable of or not capable of at all. Ejiofor climbed on him within 20 minutes. A wheel took longer. She had always been the more cautious of the two. But by the end of the afternoon she was sitting in his lap showing him a leaf she had found with the solemn concentration of someone presenting something of great scientific importance. He received the leaf with appropriate gravity. Ngozi watched this from the blanket and felt something open in her chest that she had been keeping carefully closed for a very long time. They went to a Braves game on a warm Atlanta evening and ate hot dogs and argued about baseball with the cheerful incompetence of 2 people who do not entirely understand baseball, but are enjoying themselves too much to admit it. They drove to Savannah for a weekend and walked through the historic squares in the evening light and ate seafood by the river, and Ngozi stood on a bridge over the water and looked at the Savannah sky and thought about all the skies she had looked at from windows that were not hers, and felt the difference between looking at a sky from inside a cage and looking at a sky while standing next to someone who chose to stand there beside you. She told him her story on a quiet evening in month 4 of whatever they were to each other. She told it the way she had learned to tell it in the government care facility with the therapist who had sat with her 3 times a week. Not as a performance of survival. Not as a warning about who she was or an explanation of why she was the way she was. Just as the truth of where she came from and what had happened and who she had decided to be on the other side of it. He listened to every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are the most extraordinary person I have ever met, and I do not mean that because of what you survived. I mean it because of who you are when you are standing in a park arguing about a leaf with a 2-year-old. She laughed. It was a real laugh. Nkechi met Marcus at a business networking event in month 8. a Nigerian-American contractor who had been in Atlanta for 16 years and who owned a construction company, and who walked into the networking event with the particular confidence of a man who is comfortable in his own skin, and noticed Nkechi standing near the window watching the room with those sharp cataloging eyes, and came directly to her because something about a woman who watches everything without announcing herself had always interested him more than the women who announced themselves loudly. He was loud where she was quiet, which should have been a problem and was instead the most natural thing in the world. He made her laugh in the specific way that only people who have not laughed freely in a long time can laugh when they finally find someone who knows how to reach the laughter that has been waiting under everything else. He took her to a Hawks game and to a soul food restaurant in South Atlanta that had been operating since 1967, and to Stone Mountain on a clear day where they hiked to the top and stood at the summit and the city was spread out below them, and he talked the entire way up and she said almost nothing and it was perfect. He learned her slowly. He did not rush toward the parts of her that were still being rebuilt. He found the edges of those parts and respected them completely, and came no further than she invited him, and waited with the particular patience of a man who understood that some things are worth waiting for. Epha met Jordan in month 9. He was a music producer who worked out of a studio in the old Fourth Ward neighborhood of Atlanta, and who had grown up in the city, and who carried the city in the way people carry the place that made them, in his speech and his references and his knowledge of every backstreet and every hidden restaurant and every rooftop that had a good view of the skyline. He was gentle in the specific way of people who have experienced their own difficulties and chosen gentleness as a response to the world rather than hardness. He met Epha at a live music event that Nkechi had essentially forced her to attend by the simple method of getting dressed and telling Epha they were going and not accepting any alternative suggestions. The venue was small and warm, and the music was the kind that requires you to stop thinking and just feel, and Epha had been standing near the back holding her drink and letting the music do what music does when Jordan appeared beside her and said nothing for several minutes, just stood there listening to the same music, and then said quietly without looking at her that he had been coming to this venue for 3 years, and he had never seen anyone listen to music the way she was listening to it. Right now. She looked at him. He looked back. He had kind eyes. That was the first thing she noticed. The specific kindness that lives in the eyes of people who have decided that the world has enough hardness in it and they are not going to add to the supply. He took her to every live music venue in Atlanta over the following months. To outdoor concerts in Centennial Olympic Park on warm evenings where they sat on the grass and the music came from everywhere at once. To jazz clubs in Buckhead where the music was intimate and the room was small and the distance between the musicians and the audience was close enough to feel like a conversation. He showed her the city through sound the way some people show cities through food or history, and she learned Atlanta in that particular language and loved it in that particular way, and somewhere in the middle of all of it she learned to love him too. He never asked her to explain herself. He simply kept showing up with kindness and patience and the particular music that he had started choosing specifically because he had noticed which kinds made her face do the thing it did when something reached her in the place that was still healing. A year and a half after landing in Atlanta, 3 women from Lagos who had found love in the middle of building a life rather than looking for it sat together in the apartment on a Sunday morning, and Ngozi said simply that she wanted to get married, and Nkechi said she had been thinking the same thing, and Epha looked at both of them and said she thought they should do it together, and the decision was made in the time it took to finish their morning tea, with the same naturalness as every important decision the 3 of them had ever made together. They planned it themselves. Every single detail chosen freely and completely, and with the particular joy of women who have spent enough of their lives having things chosen for them to understand the full weight of what it means to choose. They went to bridal shops in Buckhead together and tried on dresses and argued about everything with the loving combativeness of people who know each other well enough to disagree without damage. They chose white. All 3 of them. Clean and complete and entirely appropriate. The venue was a grand event space in downtown Atlanta decorated in gold and green and white. Nigerian fabric and American flowers existing together in the space with the particular harmony of things that come from different places and discover they were always compatible. The caterers they hired were another Nigerian catering company because all 3 of them agreed that 3 girls from Lagos was not going to cater their own wedding, and they laughed about this for a long time. The invitations went out to Lagos and South Africa and Atlanta and every city where people who mattered to this story were living their lives. The responses came back from everywhere. On the morning of the wedding, the 3 of them got ready together in a suite at the venue the way they had done everything important since the government care facility in Seoul. Together, in the same room, within arm's reach of each other. Miss Dora came to do their hair personally because there was no version of this day that did not include Miss Dora, and she arrived at 7 in the morning with her full kit and her continuous warm Alabama commentary, and she made all three of them look like exactly what they were. Women who had arrived somewhere worth arriving at. The twins were dressed in matching traditional Korean-style ceremonial children's suits that Ngozi had commissioned specifically, clean and precise and beautiful. Their Korean hairstyles freshly cut and perfectly neat. Their father's eyes bright with the excitement of small people who understand that today is a special day without yet knowing all the reasons why. Ejiofor kept touching his bow tie with one finger as if checking it was still there. Awil had decided that her flower basket was also a hat and had placed it on her head twice before the ceremony began and had to be gently redirected both times. The guests filled the venue with the sound of people who have flown from far places to witness something they were told about and could not miss. The families from Lagos were in the front rows, Ngozi's mother in a gold gele that caught the light every time she moved, Nkechi's father sitting straight and still with the expression of a man who has been given back something he thought was gone and is holding the gift of it carefully so as not to damage it. Epha's younger brother, 18 years old and taller than everyone in his row, sitting with his mother's hand in his and looking at the door where his sister was going to appear with the particular focused attention of someone who has been waiting for this moment for longer than anyone in the room knows. Then the doors at the back of the venue opened, and Mama Agnes walked in. She had flown from South Africa that morning on a ticket that Ngozi had bought 6 months ago, the moment the wedding date was set, because there was no version of this day that she was not present for. She was dressed in the most beautiful outfit she owned. Deep purple, gold trim, the particular dignity of a woman who knows how to dress for a moment that deserves dressing for. She walked slowly down the aisle between the seated guests, and every eye in the room followed her because there was something about the way she moved that communicated to everyone present that this woman mattered to this story in a way that the program did not fully explain. She reached the front row. She took the seat that had been reserved for her, the only seat in the front row with her name on a small card, and she sat down and she folded her hands in her lap and she looked at the doorway where the brides were going to appear, and her expression was the expression of a woman who is exactly where she is supposed to be. Ngozi saw her from the back of the venue and put her hand over her heart. Then the music changed. Afrobeats first. The specific song that all three of them had agreed on without argument, because it was the song that had been playing in a Lagos market on the last ordinary afternoon of their childhood, and all three of them remembered it, and the memory of it had survived everything. The guests who knew the song began to move in their seats, and the guests who did not know it began to move, because that is what that music does to a room regardless of whether you know it. The twins appeared first. Ejiofor walked down the aisle with enormous concentration, his ring pillow held in both hands with the careful grip of someone who has been told several times that the rings are important and has taken that information very seriously. His Korean hairstyle perfect. His little suit immaculate. His father's eyes looking straight ahead at the altar with the focused determination of a 3-year-old who has been given a job and intends to do it correctly. He dropped the pillow exactly halfway down the aisle. The rings bounced. The room gasped. Ejiofor looked at the pillow on the floor. He looked at the rings. He looked at the room full of people looking at him. He bent down, picked up the pillow, retrieved both rings with careful fingers, placed them back on the pillow, straightened up, and continued walking down the aisle as if absolutely nothing had happened. The room erupted. Laughter and applause and the specific joy of a crowd that has just been given something completely unplanned and perfect. Ngozi's mother laughed so hard she had to hold onto the arm of the woman beside her. Mama Agnes pressed both hands over her mouth. Darius in his seat near the front covered his face with one hand and his shoulders shook. Awil came behind her brother with her flower basket carried correctly this time with both hands and an expression of serene dignity that communicated she had known her brother was going to drop that pillow and had prepared herself emotionally for it. Then the brides appeared. 3 women in white. Ngozi first, then Nkechi, then Epha, walking together down the aisle of an Atlanta wedding venue toward 3 men who had chosen them freely and completely in the middle of ordinary beautiful Atlanta mornings and evenings and baseball games and hiking trails and music venues, walking toward a future that nobody had arranged for them or forced them into or decided on their behalf. The guests stood, all of them, at the same moment, without being asked. The instinctive standing of people in the presence of something that deserves to be received on your feet. Darius watched Ngozi walk toward him, and his face did the thing that faces do when they are looking at something they cannot believe they get to have. Marcus watched Nkechi, and his loudness went completely quiet in the specific way that loud people go quiet when something reaches them in a place that does not have a public response. Jordan watched Epha, and the gentleness in his eyes deepened into something that had no name but that everyone who looked at his face in that moment recognized immediately. The 3 ceremonies happened together. 3 couples. 1 altar. 1 day. The officiant moved between them, and the vows were said in the particular order that the 3 women had decided together on a Sunday morning over tea, and the room was silent for every word because every word was earned. When Ngozi said "I do," she was looking at Darius, but she was also looking at everything that had brought her to this altar. The truck. The cold marriage. The gala. The midnight escape. The locked room. The court case. The Atlanta morning on the balcony when she discovered what peace felt like. All of it present in those 2 words. All of it the foundation of what she was building now. When Nkechi said "I do," she thought about 6 years of watching a guard's routine from behind a closed door, and 4 hours of walking through Seoul in the cold, and a prepaid phone in a dim room, and a camera she looked into without flinching. She thought about all the things her silence had survived, and she let her voice be as loud as it wanted to be. When Epha said "I do," she cried. Openly and without apology. The soft dark eyes that had always been the most open of the 3 completely open now. Jordan took her hands and held them and waited, and she said the words through the crying because the crying was not stopping her. The crying was part of it. The crying was the 8 years and the locked room in Tokyo and the Tuesday morning in Tokyo when a woman she had never met took her hand and told her it was over, and the Atlanta music venues and the kind eyes and all of it arriving at this moment together. The room cried with her. Then it was done. 3 couples. 1 altar. 1 day. 1 room full of people from Lagos and South Africa and Atlanta and everywhere between them, all standing and applauding, and the music coming back louder now, and the twins running down the aisle because nobody was watching them anymore, and the flowers and the gold and the green and the white and the Afrobeats and the American soul and the smell of Nigerian food coming from the reception hall, and Mama Agnes in the front row with both hands pressed together in front of her face and her eyes closed. And her expression, the expression of a woman whose prayer has been answered so completely that there are no more words available or necessary. Outside, the Atlanta evening was beginning. The sky was doing what Atlanta skies do in the early evening, turning colors that have no names, deep orange bleeding into purple, bleeding into the particular blue that comes just before dark. Inside the venue, the reception was beginning, the food and the music and the dancing and the specific joy of people who have been given permission to be completely happy and are taking that permission seriously. 1 year later, Ngozi drove to a correctional facility outside Seoul, Korea. She had arranged the visit through the proper channels months in advance, navigating the paperwork with the same methodical patience she applied to everything. Darius had offered to come with her. She had told him this was something she needed to do with the children alone. He had understood immediately and said nothing more about it except to tell her he would be at the airport when she landed back in Atlanta. Ejiofor and Awil were in the back seat. 5 years old now, dressed neatly in the clothes she had chosen for them that morning, with their Korean hairstyles freshly cut, and their father's eyes looking out of the car window at a Seoul they had never seen before, but that was part of their story whether they knew all of it yet or not. "Where are we going?" Awil asked from the back seat. "To visit someone," Ngozi said. "Who?" "Someone I will tell you about when we get there." They were processed through security with the particular careful attention that visitation with high-profile inmates required. Through corridors. Through doors. Into a visitation room with a long table divided down the center by a panel of reinforced glass. They waited. Then he was brought in. He sat down on the other side of the glass, and for a moment he simply looked at the space in front of him, adjusting to the room the way people adjust to rooms after long periods in very different rooms. Then he looked up. He saw Ngozi first. She looked exactly like herself. That was the first thing. Exactly like the woman who had stood in his trafficking location at 18 years old and looked back at him without dropping her eyes. Exactly like the woman who had packed a bag at midnight and looked at him from a bedroom doorframe without turning around. Exactly like the woman who had looked at him across a Seoul courtroom while a judge read 50 years into the room. Exactly like herself. Unchanged in the only way that had ever mattered. Then his eyes moved to the children beside her. He saw Ejiofor's face. He saw Awil's face. He was completely still. He looked at them for a long time. At the Korean features that were his. At the eyes that were his. At the children sitting beside their mother with the natural easy confidence of small people who have been loved well and know it completely. Ngozi spoke first. She told him their names. She told him what their names meant. Ejiofor, I am victorious. Awil, pathway. She told him they were healthy and happy and loved. She told him they lived in Atlanta, Georgia with their mother and their mother's husband who showed up for them every single day. She told him they would know who he was, that she was not going to hide that from them, that the truth of where they came from was something they deserved to have access to and she was going to give it to them when they were old enough to hold it. She told him that when they were old enough she would bring them back and let them decide for themselves what kind of relationship, if any, they wanted with their father. She said all of this clearly and without cruelty and without warmth. The specific neutral tone of a woman delivering information she has decided to deliver because it is the right thing to do and not because she needs anything from the person receiving it. He listened to every word. Then he looked at Ejiofor directly through the glass. The boy looked back at him. 5 years old with his father's eyes and his mother's unbreakable face. His Korean hairstyle neat and precise. His small hands folded in his lap with the particular stillness of a child who has been told to sit nicely and is taking the instructions seriously. He looked at the man on the other side of the glass with the open, uncomplicated attention of someone who does not yet have a framework for what he is looking at and is simply looking. The Mafia Boss pressed his hand flat against the glass. Ejiofor looked at the hand. He looked at his mother. Ngozi gave him nothing. No instruction. No direction. No expression that communicated what the correct response was. She simply looked back at him with the same neutrality she gave everything that required his free decision, and she waited. Ejiofor looked at the hand on the glass again. Then he reached up slowly and placed his small hand against the glass on the other side. Not pressing hard. Just resting there. The way small hands rest on things they are curious about. The two hands on either side of the glass, one large and one small, separated by everything that existed between them and connected by the single undeniable fact of what they shared. Ngozi watched this. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply watched her son make his first free choice about his father, and she honored it completely because that was what she had promised, and she had never in her life made a promise she did not keep. They left 20 minutes later. In the car on the way back to the airport, Awil was looking out of the window at Seoul moving past with the particular focused attention of a 5-year-old encountering a new city. Then she turned from the window. "Mommy," she said. "Who was that man?" Ngozi looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. At the round face and the Korean features and the soft dark eyes that were her father's but looked out at the world with her mother's particular quality of attention. At Awil, pathway. Named on purpose. Someone who is part of your story, she said. But not the most important part. Awil thought about this with the serious concentration she applied to things that required thinking about. Are we the most important part? She asked. Ngozi looked at the road ahead. At Seoul around them. At the airport that was going to take them back to Atlanta and Darius waiting and the business and Miss Dora and Sunday morning church and Piedmont Park and all the ordinary beautiful chosen life waiting for them on the other side of this flight. You are the whole story, she said. Screen fades to black. Final text on screen appears one line at a time. Ejiofor, I am victorious. Awil, pathway. Their mother named them that on purpose, and so they lived. Not perfectly. Not without the weight of everything that came before, but freely, completely, on their own terms for the first time. Ngozi woke up every morning next to a man who chose her. Not bought her, not claimed her, chose her. And every morning that difference felt like the most significant thing in the world. Nkechi built a life as loud and full as the silence she survived in. A business, a home, a man who asked questions and actually listened. She laughed more in 1 year in Atlanta than in the 8 years before it combined. Epha found that love can be gentle enough to reach the places that were broken. That someone moving carefully around your wounds is not weakness. It is the specific kindness of a person who understands that healing takes longer than the world is usually willing to wait. 3 girls from Lagos, taken at 18. returned to themselves at 26. And now here, in Atlanta, married, loved, free. Ejiofor and Awil grew up knowing both sides of their story. Their mother made sure of that. She gave them the truth, and then she gave them the freedom to decide what to do with it. They chose love, just like their mother. If the story moved something in you that you did not expect to be moved, you are not alone. Thousands of people have watched this story from the ballroom in Seoul all the way to this car on a Seoul street, and they have felt every single thing you are feeling right now. If you watched every second of this story and you felt something real, drop a comment right now and tell me what moment got you the most. Was it the reunion on the floor in Seoul? Was it Mama Agnes walking into that wedding? Was it Ejiofor's hand on the glass? Tell me. I read every comment and I want to know. If the story deserves to be seen by more people, share it right now. You know exactly who in your life needs to watch this story. Send it to them before you do anything else. And to every single person who has been with these three girls from Lagos since the ballroom in Seoul, since the wig, since the cold mansion and the midnight escape and the locked room and the court case and the Atlanta morning and the wedding and the prison visit, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling it. Thank you for staying until the end. These three girls from Lagos deserved an audience that stayed until the end. You were exactly that. See you in the next story.